Welcome, future masters. King and pawn endgame. Well, it looks pretty basic to me. What happens here, or if you look at this right now, there's kind of three sections. 3 versus 2 is section 1. 1 versus 1 is section 2. And then 1 versus 0 is section 3. Now, 1 versus 0 means this king is going to have to take this pawn. Now, normally, on a more general basis, black has an advantage that he has an outside pass pawn on the H-file. In this case, section 2 is a wall that blocks this king from stopping these guys. So the 3 versus 2 offsets the H pawn, and it boils down to, is the 3 versus 2 more valuable than the single H pawn, or vice versa? And that's how you're going to determine who wins. So these pawns are irrelevant. They cancel each other out, and they just form a wall to block this king. So this white king would stop this pawn either winning or not. If I stop this pawn and he ends up taking this and queen, whatever. But I think just simple b4, c5, and we queen faster than he can do anything. Yeah, whatever, dude. He's not a threat until he moves to h3, just letting you know. Make a pass for myself. He can't stop mine, but I can stop his. Again, he's not a threat. Okay, technically, wait a second. If I push 6 and he goes to 6, it's over. I go king to here and he's toast. 6, he goes here, 7, there's nothing he could do. There's no reason to chase this pawn until now. I'm in the square again. In the square again. So, you saw me explain this whole problem while I'm doing it. While I'm doing it in under 3 minutes. These are the concepts that you have to look at and understand in the king and pawn endgames. It's fairly basic to me. I have done the work in the past, literally over 40 years ago. So, most of the times, the explanations of these endgames are not as clean. I simplify it better than most, because the difference is most of the times you're going to get really strong players who are really strong players, okay? But the really strong player has a tendency to forget that everybody else is not close to his ability. So this is what I learned from my chemistry professor. This guy was, that guy was a super PhD of chemistry. And his lesson is really, to me, it was almost a kung fu master's lesson. His greatest lesson was, when you're really good at something, you tend to make it look easier than it is. So I learned that lesson, and then I add to that lesson with that his lesson is correct. But what I do is explain things, and I make the explanation easier for the student to understand. I did this when I was teaching math classes. When I was working to be a teacher, I was substitute teaching, that's the easiest job in the world. It's a babysitting job. But the thing that was good about it was that I was an expert in math and science, and I was the only substitute teacher that was a math and science guy. So, I would go into math classes, advanced math, okay? And I would ask those kids, "Hey, what are you doing today?" One time, one of the girls said, "It's trigonometry. You're not going to be able to help us." And I'm like, "Well, that is true from her perspective, because all they see is a career. When you're in high school or in lower levels, you have a substitute teacher. It's babysitter day, okay?" I go, "Well, that would be normally true, except I'm an expert in trigonometry and beyond, but that didn't really matter." She looked at me like, "Oh, really?" And there was another time I did it, and I was sitting there, first class of the day. One of the guys, and I had been in that class before. This kid walks in. He was about 17. Super nice guy. He's like, literally, he turns the corner, comes in the door, and goes, "Thank God." And I looked around. I'm like, "What happened?" He goes, "You could explain this to us. This lady cannot explain this stuff worth a crud." I said, "What are you doing?" He showed me these parabola equations. And I'm like, "Really?" He said, "This lady is terrible. She can't explain diddly squat." I go, "Okay, no problem." So the class showed up, and they knew, like, this was an advanced math class, and they knew, because I had been there before and helped them. So I knocked it out. It was super easy stuff, it was just parabola equations, analytic geometry, no big deal. And I explained it to them like the way my math teacher explained it to me, who he was a terrific guy as well. So I'm like, dude, I had really good teachers explain this stuff to me, so I can explain it, which is why I can explain king and pawn endgames to you guys in a way you've never seen it. No one ever tells you have like this group 1, group 2, and group 3. I've never seen this before, but to me, I'm a science and math guy. This is how you would do this in science. We're going to analyze this scientifically. So that's why I come up with neutral, and it becomes 1 versus 0 against 3 versus 2. B4 was the obvious move, but I had to set it up. I could have just played B4, and you guys would have been like, "How the heck did he do that? How do you know that's the move?" Well, I taught you my sequence of how I know that is the move, because I break this down into its elements. It's a three-part puzzle. You got to figure out which is the dominant part, which I did. I told you which 2 parts were going to be competing for dominance, which was the A through C files versus the H file. And anyone who's really, really studied king and pawn endgames like I have, we see that B4 is probably the winning move inside of 10 seconds. So it's not a question of me demonstrating to you that I'm excellent, which is true, obviously. This is about me showing you guys how to look at your own games of king and pawn endgames. And over time, more of this will transfer. But if any of this is transferring to you, you look at this now and you're like, "Oh man," looking at this, you can now group these pawns mentally and go, I understand more now by looking at this problem than you have before. So I don't know. Let me see what's going on with this. This is like a 10-minute lesson, but this is awesome. So I'll talk to you guys later.